Hello? Is everything all right? It's about your son. Hello?
Hello, confirming arrangements for.
What? No, that's impossible. Yes, that's correct. Thank you. You did what? I don't understand. A burial? For who? Before the transfer? Yes, Mom, it made sense.
The call came at 8:17 on a Tuesday morning while I was buttering toast in the kitchen of the house I had lived in for 34 years. Mrs. Grace Whitmore, the woman asked. This is Rebecca Hayes from Heritage Grove Funeral Home. I'm calling to confirm your prearranged burial. My hand froze. My what? She hesitated. Then she read my full name, birth date, home address, even my late husband's name. I think you've made a mistake, I whispered. I've never been to your funeral home. Silence. Then Rebecca said something that made me put the knife down. Your son asked us to confirm the arrangements before the property transfer is finalized. Michael. My only son. And somehow he had arranged my burial while I was still alive. If you were in my place, would you confront your son immediately, or stay quiet and find out how far this had gone? Tell me in the comments. And if stories about family trust and the truths we discover too late mean something to you, please like and subscribe. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes it helps to remember that wherever we are, none of us is listening alone. I stayed at the kitchen table for several minutes after Rebecca Hayes ended the call. My toast went cold, the coffee beside it did too. I kept staring at my phone as though Michael's name might suddenly appear on the screen with an explanation that would turn the whole thing into something harmless. It didn't. My first instinct was to call him. I even opened his contact and held my thumb over the green button. Then I remembered Rebecca's exact words. Before the property transfer is finalized, not funeral arrangements, not family planning, property transfer. I closed the contact. At 68, I had learned something I wished I'd understood at 38. When somebody gives you information they didn't intend for you to have, don't immediately tell the person you're suspicious of. Listen first. So instead of calling my son, I called Heritage Grove Funeral Home back. Rebecca answered. This is Grace Whitmore. I want to see whatever you have with my name on it. There was a pause. Mrs. Whitmore, I think that's a very good idea. 40 minutes later, I was driving across Columbus beneath a pale Ohio sky. Heritage Grove sat behind a row of maple trees on the north side of the city. It was a quiet brick building with white columns and carefully trimmed hedges. I had driven past funeral homes like that hundreds of times. I had never imagined walking into one to investigate my own burial. Rebecca met me in the lobby. She was probably in her early 50s, dressed in a charcoal suit, with the calm expression of someone accustomed to meeting people on the worst days of their lives. Mrs. Whitmore. Yes, she offered her hand. I'm Rebecca Hayes. Thank you for coming. I followed her into a small office. There were two upholstered chairs, a wooden desk, and a box of tissues positioned close enough to reach without asking. Rebecca closed the door. I want to begin by apologizing, she said. Our confirmation procedure is exactly why I called, but I understand how disturbing this must have been. Disturbing, my voice came out sharper than I intended. Someone planned my funeral. She nodded. And we're going to determine exactly what happened. Rebecca turned her monitor toward me. Your file was opened 3 weeks ago. She clicked through several screens. My name appeared at the top. Grace Elaine Whitmore. My birthday. My address. My phone number. Widowed. Spouse Robert Whitmore deceased. I felt my stomach tighten when I saw Robert's name. He had been gone 4 years. Michael knew how difficult losing him had been for me. He knew I still kept Robert's old gardening gloves hanging beside the garage door because I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Rebecca opened another page. The arrangements were detailed: a traditional service, visitation the evening before, a walnut finish casket, white lilies, a printed obituary package, a cemetery plot beside Robert. There was even a preference for the hymn, Amazing Grace. I stared at the screen. That had been played at Robert's funeral. Michael knew that too. This isn't random, I whispered. No, Rebecca said carefully. It doesn't appear to be. She printed several pages. I picked up the first one. There was a section labeled Family Contact. Michael Whitmore, Relationship Son. Under another heading, he was identified as Authorized Family Representative. I looked at Rebecca. What does that mean? In this context, it means he was the family member communicating with us regarding the arrangements. It doesn't automatically give him legal authority over you. But he told you I wanted this. The information submitted indicated these were your wishes. They aren't. I understand. I turned another page. There were estimated costs for transportation preparation service, burial and cemetery expenses. Someone had thought about everything. My death had been organized into neat little boxes. Flowers, music, casket, obituary, as if I were already gone. Then I reached the signature page. My breath stopped. At the bottom was a signature, Grace Whitmore. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Rebecca watched me carefully. Is that your signature? It looks like it. That was what frightened me. The capital G curled exactly the way I wrote it. The W had the same narrow first stroke. Even the final E in Grace tilted upward. But I knew I had never signed that page. I touched the paper. I didn't sign this. Are you certain? I looked straight at her. I spent 31 years supervising payroll records. I know what I sign. Rebecca's expression changed immediately. She pulled the paper closer. Then we're stopping everything. She turned to her computer and began typing. No further action will be taken on this file. I'm also flagging it for internal review. Can I have copies? Yes. Everything. She nodded. I'll provide everything we're permitted to release to you. I looked again at the signature. The strange thing was that it wasn't a bad forgery. It was almost perfect. That made it worse. A stranger might miss the angle of my G. Michael wouldn't. He had seen my signature his entire life. Birthday cards, school permission slips, checks, Christmas presents. I hated myself for even thinking it. Rebecca handed me another page. This is the contact information associated with the arrangement. My phone number was correct. My street address was correct. Then I saw the email, grace.whitmore68. I frowned. What is that the email address provided for you? I've never seen it before. Rebecca looked at me. You don't use this account. Number my actual email address had Robert's initials in it. I had used the same one for nearly 15 years. Can you tell when that address was entered? Rebecca checked. It was provided when the file was created. By Michael. She hesitated. The initial inquiry was associated with your son's contact information. Some later communications came through the email listed as yours. I felt cold despite the warm office. Communications pretending to be from me. Rebecca didn't answer immediately. I think that's something our compliance staff needs to review. I leaned back. This was no longer simply my son making inappropriate funeral arrangements. Someone had created an identity for me, an email address bearing my name, a signature that looked like mine, preferences built from private family memories. And somewhere in those communications, somebody had apparently convinced Heritage Grove that I had personally approved what was happening. Rebecca gathered the copies into a folder. Mrs. Whitmore, may I ask you something? Yes. Does anyone else have access to your financial or personal documents? I almost said no. Then a memory surfaced. Michael sitting at my dining room table months earlier. A stack of papers between us. His finger tapping beside little yellow signature tabs. Just insurance paperwork, Mom. Dad had some of this set up wrong. I'm helping you clean it up. At the time I hadn't questioned him. Why would I? He was my son. I had trusted Michael before he was old enough to cross the street alone. I need to go home, I said. Rebecca stood. If anyone contacts you claiming this funeral plan is active, call me directly. I took the folder. At the door I turned back. Rebecca, the email account. Yes. Can you print every message it sent you? Her expression told me the answer before she spoke. There are several. My fingers tightened around the folder. How many? She checked the screen. 7. 7 messages, written in my name, sent from an account I had never created. And as Rebecca began printing them, I realized something that frightened me more than the burial plot. Whoever had done this wasn't pretending to be my son. They were pretending to be me. I read the 7 emails twice before leaving Heritage Grove. They were short, polite, and frighteningly ordinary. Thank you for helping me put these matters in order. My son Michael has my permission to coordinate the remaining details. Yes, I would prefer the plot beside my late husband. Every message ended the same way. Grace Whitmore. Whoever had written them knew how I spoke well enough to sound almost believable. But there were little things that bothered me. I never called Robert my late husband in conversation. I called him Robert. And I certainly would never describe planning my own burial as putting matters in order. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. By the time I pulled into my driveway, fear had begun turning into anger. I carried the folder inside, locked the door, and called Michael. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded normal. That hurt more than I expected. "Michael, do you know anything about Heritage Grove Funeral Home?" There was a pause. Not long. Maybe 1 second. But mothers know their children's pauses. "What about it?" "They called me this morning." Another pause. Then he sighed. Oh, that. As though I had asked about a magazine subscription. "They called to confirm my burial, Michael." "Mom, don't get upset." "I'm not upset. It was a lie. I want you to explain it." He began speaking in the patient voice people use when they have already decided your reaction is unreasonable. "It was just advance planning, that's all. Advance planning for whose funeral? Yours eventually. Not now, obviously." I stared through the kitchen window. Robert had planted the maple tree in our backyard 22 years earlier. Its branches now reached above the roof. "You planned my funeral without telling me. I was going to tell you, when once I had everything organized." "Why would you organize my funeral?" Michael exhaled loudly. "Because when Dad died, nobody knew what to do." That wasn't true. Robert and I had discussed his wishes. Michael had been devastated and overwhelmed, yes, but the arrangements had not been chaos. "I remember your father's funeral," I said. "Exactly. It was horrible. Losing him was horrible. Planning his service wasn't." "Mom, you're missing the point." "No, Michael. I think I'm finally paying attention to the point." Silence. I opened the folder. "Why does Heritage Grove have a document with my signature?" "What document?" "A pre-arrangement form." "I don't know. It looks exactly like my signature." "Then maybe you signed something and forgot." The words landed harder than I expected. Forgot. I sat down. "I didn't forget. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you. You just suggested I signed my own funeral paperwork and forgot doing it." "No, I'm saying there was a lot of paperwork after Dad died. Maybe something got mixed together. Robert had been dead 4 years. The Heritage Grove file had been opened 3 weeks ago. That doesn't make sense. Then the funeral home made a mistake. They also have an email address in my name." Michael went quiet. "An email address. One I've never used. I don't know anything about that. 7 messages were sent from it." "Mom, this is getting ridiculous." There it was. Not concern, not shock. I had just told my son somebody was impersonating me, and his reaction was irritation. I lowered my voice. "Did you create that email account?" "No." "Did Lauren?" "Of course not." "Then who did?" "I don't know." "Ask the funeral home." "I did." I let the silence stretch. "Rebecca said the original inquiry was associated with you." Michael's voice hardened. "Because I contacted them. I already told you that. But you didn't tell me. I was trying to help you." I closed my eyes. Those 5 words had excused more damage in families than almost anything else. "I was trying to help you. Don't make any more arrangements for me," I said. "Fine. No funeral home, no cemetery. Nothing. Fine, Mom." He hung up before I did. I remained at the table holding the silent phone. Michael had never ended a conversation with me like that. 20 minutes later, Lauren called. I almost didn't answer. Then I remembered what I had told myself that morning. "Listen first." "Hello, Lauren." Grace Michael told me what happened. Her voice was warm and concerned. I think he feels terrible. Does he? He was only trying to take some pressure off you. By planning my burial. You know that's not what he meant. I said nothing. Lauren continued. After Robert passed, you had so much to handle. Michael worries about you. I've handled myself quite well for 68 years. I know, nobody's saying otherwise. Then came the word, but. I waited. But sometimes we don't notice little changes in ourselves. My fingers tightened around the phone. What changes? Oh, Grace, please don't misunderstand me. Tell me. She hesitated delicately. You've seemed a little forgetful lately. There it was again. First Michael, now Lauren. Give me an example. Well, just one. You asked Emily twice what time her school concert started. The first time she said 7. Then Michael told me 6:30, because parking would be difficult. Lauren went quiet. That isn't forgetting, I said. That's receiving two different answers. I wasn't trying to criticize you. Any other examples? Grace, this conversation is becoming uncomfortable. It became uncomfortable when somebody forged my signature. I really think you should calm down. My anger suddenly disappeared. In its place came something colder. Clarity. Lauren wasn't trying to reassure me. She was establishing a story. Grace forgets things. Grace gets confused. Grace signs papers she doesn't remember. I had spent 3 decades in payroll. I had seen employees try to explain altered timesheets, unauthorized deductions, and missing approvals. The smartest lies were rarely dramatic. They were built from small statements repeated until they sounded like facts. I have to go, I said. Please don't be angry with Michael. I said I have to go. I ended the call. For the first time since the funeral home called, I didn't feel frightened. I felt alert. I carried the Heritage Grove folder into the small room Robert and I had always called the office. My filing cabinet stood beneath the window. Insurance, taxes, utilities, house, everything had its place. I checked my homeowner's insurance first. Nothing unusual. Then the deed, still there. Robert and I had paid off the mortgage 7 years before he died. After his death, the property had transferred fully to me. My house, my name, my responsibility. I was returning the deed to its folder when I heard the mail carrier outside. A few minutes later, I collected the envelopes from the box. Electric bill, grocery circular, a charity solicitation. Then I saw one from my bank, Franklin Community Bank. I nearly tossed it onto the desk unopened, assuming it was another statement. Something stopped me. Maybe it was the morning I'd had. Maybe once someone secretly arranges your funeral, ordinary envelopes stop feeling ordinary. I opened it. The letter began, Dear Ms. Whitmore, this letter confirms receipt of your recent request for property-related account documentation and mortgage payoff information. I read it again. Then a third time. Mortgage payoff information. I didn't have a mortgage. The house had been paid off for years. Below that was a reference number and a sentence telling me the requested documentation had been prepared following verification submitted through my online contact information. I had made no request. My heart began pounding. I picked up the Heritage Grove folder and found the printed page containing the false email address. Then I looked at the bank letter. Funeral arrangements, a forged signature, on email pretending to be mine, and now someone had contacted my bank about my house. Suddenly, Rebecca's words that morning no longer sounded strange. They sounded precise. Before the property transfer is finalized. I sat alone in the office where Robert and I had once planned vacations, paid bills, and celebrated the day we made our final mortgage payment. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask the question I had been avoiding. My son hadn't simply been preparing for the day I died. Someone was preparing to take control of what I owned while I was still alive, and Michael had just told me I was forgetting things. I was standing inside Franklin Community Bank before 10 the next morning. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw 3 things: my signature on the funeral form, the false email address, and the bank letter mentioning my house. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia Lane, invited me into her office after I explained that I believed someone had requested information using my identity. She asked for my driver's license account information and the letter. Then she began typing. I see the request, she said. What exactly did they ask for? Patricia studied her monitor. A mortgage payoff statement and documentation related to property ownership. But there is no mortgage. I can see that. Your mortgage was satisfied several years ago. That's why no payoff statement could actually be generated. Then why would anyone request one? Sometimes it's part of gathering documents for a refinance sale, title review, or transfer. Transfer. That word again. I opened my purse and removed the Heritage Grove papers. Can you tell me how the request was made? Patricia looked more closely. It appears to have started electronically. Which email address? She turned the screen slightly away, following privacy procedure. Before I give you that information, I'll need to verify a few additional security questions. She asked me the street where I had lived before my current house, the approximate year I opened my checking account, and the name of the beneficiary listed on one of my certificates of deposit. I answered everything. Patricia looked satisfied. Then she read the email address. It was the same one Heritage Grove had. My false email. I placed the funeral home printout on her desk. This address, Patricia compared them. Yes, for a moment neither of us spoke. I did not create that account, I said. Her professional calm changed, not dramatically, but enough. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to place additional security restrictions on your accounts. Please do. We'll also document that you dispute the request. Was any money moved? No. Any accounts opened? Not that I can see here. I exhaled. It was the first good news I'd received in 24 hours. Then Patricia added, but I recommend reviewing your credit reports and speaking with an attorney if you believe someone is attempting to use your identity in connection with your property. I intend to. She printed the available records and slid them toward me. Before leaving, I asked one more question. Could my son have obtained this information if he knew my social security number and personal details? Patricia chose her words carefully. Knowing information about someone doesn't automatically give another person legal authority, but it can make fraudulent requests easier to attempt. I thanked her. Outside, I sat in my car without starting it. Michael knew everything someone would need. My birthday. Robert's social security information from settling his estate, my mother's maiden name, the house details, my banking habits. He wasn't some stranger stealing mail from my box. How was the little boy whose first savings account I had opened in that very bank? I drove home. Once inside, I went directly to the office. This time I wasn't looking for proof that Michael had done something. I was looking for the moment I had unknowingly given him the opportunity. Then I remembered. 6 months earlier. Michael had arrived one Saturday afternoon carrying a blue folder. I had been making vegetable soup. Mom. I went through some of Dad's old insurance paperwork, he'd said. There are a few things you should update. I hadn't questioned why he had it. After Robert died, Michael helped me sort several boxes of documents. Some stayed with him because he said he would scan them. That afternoon, he spread papers across my dining table. There were yellow tabs beside signature lines. Beneficiary confirmations, insurance information, emergency contact updates. At least that was what he told me. I remembered signing several pages while getting up twice to check the stove. Michael had laughed. Mom, sit down. The soup isn't going anywhere. I had laughed too. Now the memory made me sick. I opened the cabinet where I kept the blue folder. It was still there. I carried it to the dining table and emptied everything out. Then I counted. 9 documents. I remembered more. Not exactly how many, but more than 9. I began sorting them by date. One insurance form referenced an attachment, Schedule A. There was no Schedule A. Another page had staple holes in the upper corner, but was no longer attached to anything. I ran my fingers over them. Something had been removed. I sat back. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. That thought came automatically. Mothers become experts at manufacturing innocent explanations for their children. Maybe Michael had taken pages to make copies. Maybe the insurance company had removed them. Maybe I was becoming exactly what Lauren suggested, forgetful, confused. I hated that thought most of all, so I did something simple. I found my calendar. I had kept paper calendars for 40 years. On the Saturday, Michael brought the documents I had written, Michael Insurance Papers, 2-0. Below it in smaller handwriting, signed forms. Ask him for copies. I stared at those words. I hadn't imagined the meeting. And I hadn't forgotten that there were multiple forms. I took photographs of every document. Then I called Daniel Brooks. Daniel had lived across the street for 19 years. He and Robert had spent countless Saturdays repairing lawn equipment and arguing about Ohio State football. Grace, everything. Okay, I need to ask you something strange. At our age, strange is usually more interesting than normal. Normally, I would have laughed. I didn't. Do you remember seeing Michael here about 6 months ago? He brought paperwork. Daniel was quiet. I remember his truck being there a few times. Nothing else. Why, I'll explain later. Another pause. Then he said, Grace, is somebody bothering you? The concern in his voice nearly broke me. No, I'm just checking something. Well, if you need me, I'm across the street. I know. After hanging up, I searched online for the county recorder's office. Property records were public. My deed still showed my name. That relieved me. Then I noticed the office offered records of document inquiries and property-related filings. I called. After navigating through several extensions, I reached a clerk. I explained that I owned my home and wanted to know whether anything recent had been filed against the property. Nothing had. Another small relief. Then I asked whether anyone could inquire about transferring ownership without filing anything. Certainly, the clerk said. People call with procedural questions all the time. Can you tell who called about my property? Not usually, unless there was a formal request attached to a record. I gave her the parcel number anyway. Keyboard clicking. Then she paused. There is a note from an information request. My heart tightened. What kind? Someone requested instructions regarding a quitclaim deed and asked whether an attorney was required. When she gave me a date. 3 weeks earlier. The same week the funeral file had been opened. Is there a name? I can tell you the name listed on the request. I gripped the phone. Yes. Michael Whitmore. For a second the room seemed to tilt. I thanked her somehow and ended the call. Then I sat at the dining table where Michael had placed those yellow tabs 6 months earlier. I knew what a quitclaim deed was. Robert and I had dealt with one years ago when reorganizing ownership after refinancing. It could transfer an interest in property. Michael had been asking how to transfer mine. The funeral home knew about a property transfer. The bank had received a request for ownership documents. And my son had personally contacted the county about a deed. I looked around the house. The oak cabinet Robert built. The marks on the kitchen doorway where we measured Michael as he grew. The staircase where Emily had once sat in her pajamas waiting for Santa. This wasn't just property worth nearly $500,000. It was my life. And suddenly I understood why the missing pages from that blue folder mattered so much. Someone hadn't merely copied my signature, they might already have a genuine one. The next morning I called Thomas Reed. I had met Thomas 7 years earlier when Robert and I updated our wills. He was the kind of attorney who never rushed to silence. Robert liked him for that. When his assistant asked what the appointment concerned, I said estate planning and possible misuse of my signature. She found me a slot that afternoon. Thomas's office occupied the second floor of a renovated brick building near downtown Columbus. I arrived carrying the Heritage Grove folder, the bank letter copies of my insurance documents, and 3 decades of trust in my son that suddenly felt embarrassingly fragile. Thomas looked older than I remembered. So did I, probably. Grace, he said, taking my hand. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I don't know what the circumstances are yet. Then let's find out. For almost an hour, I told him everything. The funeral call, the false email, the signature, Michael's explanation, Lauren's comments about my memory, the bank request, the county recorder inquiry, the missing pages from the blue folder. Thomas interrupted only to clarify dates. When I finished, he removed his glasses. First, I want you to understand something. A funeral prearrangement doesn't give your son authority over your property. Relief moved through me. But he continued. Taken together, these events concern me. How he folded his hands. If someone wanted to create the appearance that an older adult was voluntarily transitioning out of independent living, they might assemble documentation showing several things. He counted them quietly. End-of-life planning, property preparation, financial organization, delegation of responsibility to an adult child. I stared at him. You mean they're building a story? Thomas nodded. That is one possibility. The phrase chilled me. A story, not one dramatic lie. A collection of little truths and manufactured facts. Grace planned her funeral. Grace's son handled the arrangements. Grace requested property documents. Grace was forgetful. Grace wanted help. I remembered Lauren saying, "Sometimes we don't notice little changes in ourselves. What would they need that for? It depends on what they're attempting. To sell my house. They cannot lawfully sell property you own simply because they're your family. Then what are they missing, authority?" The word hung between us. Thomas asked whether I had ever signed a power of attorney naming Michael. No. Ever. Not that I know of. His expression sharpened. Don't say it that way. I frowned. What way? Not that you know of. That's the language people around you seemed to be encouraging. I felt my face grow warm. He was right. 2 days earlier, I would have said absolutely not. Now Michael and Lauren had made me question my own memory. Thomas leaned forward. Grace, do you remember knowingly appointing Michael as your financial agent? No. Then say no. No. Good. It was such a small thing, but I felt something return to me. Certainty. Thomas asked about other access Michael had. Bank accounts, number, online passwords. Not intentionally. Safe deposit box, number, medical records. He was listed as my emergency contact. Bills, I paid them myself. Insurance. Michael had helped organize paperwork after Robert died. Thomas made notes. Has he asked to take over any of those responsibilities? I thought about it. Yes, when several times. The memories came faster now. Last Christmas. Michael had offered to put my utilities on automatic payment through an account he could keep an eye on. In February, Lauren suggested adding herself to my medical portal because, as she put it, hospitals can be confusing. 2 months later, Michael asked where I kept my original will. Then there was the afternoon he suggested I 2 months later, Michael asked where I kept my original will. Then there was the afternoon he suggested I give him a spare key to my safe deposit box. At the time, each request had sounded practical. Together they looked different. Thomas must have seen the realization on my face. Patterns are easier to see backward, he said. I swallowed. I thought they were helping me. Perhaps some of those offers began that way. We should focus on what we can document. I appreciated that. He wasn't turning my son into a monster for me. He was following evidence. So what do I do? First, you don't confront Michael about anything else. I already confronted him about the funeral home. That's enough. Let him believe that's all you discovered. My stomach tightened. You want me to pretend I want you to protect yourself while we determine what exists. Thomas prepared a list. I would change my email and banking passwords. Freeze access to new credit where appropriate. Place verbal security instructions with financial institutions. Secure original estate documents. Document every unusual contact. Most importantly, Thomas wanted to review and update my estate plan immediately. If there is an old authorization somewhere that you've forgotten about, we'll revoke anything that needs revoking. I almost laughed at the word forgotten. Thomas noticed. That's not a judgment about your memory. I know. For the first time that day, I smiled. We reviewed my will. Michael was still my primary beneficiary. Emily received a separate educational bequest. Seeing Michael's name hurt. Do I remove him? Thomas looked at me. That's not a legal question. That's your decision. I wasn't ready. Anger can make permanent decisions feel satisfying. Robert used to tell me never to sign anything important while furious or frightened. So I left the beneficiary provisions alone for the moment. But I changed something else. No one would receive financial authority over me without safeguards. Thomas prepared updated documents requiring independent verification for any future delegation involving my home or major accounts. When I signed them, I read every line, twice. Thomas noticed that too. You'll never sign beside another yellow tab without reading again, will you? No. The sadness in my own voice surprised me. Michael taught me that. Before leaving, I handed Thomas the blue folder. Can you determine whether pages were removed? Possibly. More importantly, I can determine whether any related documents were recorded or presented elsewhere. He examined the staple holes. Then he asked, "Do you have copies of everything Michael originally brought Num?" Did he? He said he was scanning documents after Robert died. Thomas wrote that down. As I stood to leave, his assistant knocked. She handed him a printed page. Thomas read it, and something in his expression changed. What? He didn't answer immediately. Thomas, I asked my staff to perform a preliminary search while we were talking. For what? Any recent documents or inquiries connected with your name that might indicate delegated authority. My mouth went dry. And there appears to have been a document request made to a title-related service. What kind of document? He looked directly at me. A power of attorney. For a second I couldn't process the words. I told you. I never gave Michael power of attorney. I believe you. Then why would anyone request one that is exactly what we need to determine? I sat down again. Does it have my name? Yes. Michael's. Thomas looked back at the page. It identifies you as the principal and the agent. He hesitated just long enough for me to know. Michael Whitmore. The room became painfully quiet. I thought of the yellow tabs, the missing pages, my genuine signature sitting somewhere it might never have belonged. Thomas placed the paper face down. We don't know yet whether a valid document exists, whether something was improperly assembled, or whether it was ever used. I don't want you assuming facts before we have them. But there was one fact I could no longer avoid. My son had not merely asked about my funeral. He had not merely asked about my house. Somebody had begun asking whether Michael Whitmore had legal authority to act as Grace Whitmore. As I drove home, I passed streets I had known for decades, but Columbus looked unfamiliar. I kept thinking about all the ordinary moments when Michael had offered to take care of things. I had always heard love in those words. Now I wondered whether I should have heard something else. When I reached my driveway, Daniel was watering flowers across the street. He lifted one hand. I waved back. Then I looked at my house and made myself a promise. Until Thomas discovered exactly what had been done in my name, Michael would not know how much I knew. For the first time in my life, I was going to keep a secret from my son. Because somewhere there might already be a document claiming he had the right to make decisions for me, and I intended to find it before he made another one. Emily came to my house 2 days later. She didn't call first. That alone told me something was wrong. My granddaughter had been raised in the age of text messages. She would text from my driveway before ringing the bell. That Friday afternoon, I heard 3 quick knocks and found her standing on the porch with her backpack hanging from one shoulder. Grandma Emily. What's wrong? Nothing. At 17, she still said nothing exactly the way Michael had at 17 when absolutely something was wrong. I stepped aside. Come in. She followed me to the kitchen. Normally, Emily opened my refrigerator before taking off her coat. That day, she sat at the table with both hands around her phone. I poured her lemonade. She didn't touch it. Okay, I said. I'm not going to interrogate you, but I'm also not going to pretend you came across town after school because you suddenly missed my lemonade. That earned a tiny smile. Then it disappeared. Grandma, are you moving? I stopped. Moving where I don't know. Why would you ask me that? Emily stared down at her phone. Dad said you might. When? A couple weeks ago. I sat across from her. What exactly did he say? He said you were thinking about moving somewhere smaller. Did he say assisted living? Her eyes lifted immediately. That was enough. He did. Emily. I'm not moving. She looked relieved, then confused. Are you sure? Yes. But Mom said. She stopped herself. What did your mother say? Emily's face tightened. I don't want to get them in trouble. The words hurt. You're not responsible for protecting adults from the consequences of what they say. She looked at me for several seconds. Then she whispered, "They've been fighting." "About me sometimes." I kept my voice calm. "Tell me only what you feel comfortable telling me." Emily twisted the straw wrapper between her fingers. Dad's business is having problems. That part I hadn't known. Michael had run Whitmore Residential Contracting for almost 12 years. He renovated kitchens, additions, basements, and occasionally entire homes. How bad I don't know. But really bad, I think. She told me Michael had lost money on 2 projects. One homeowner had refused final payment after a dispute. Another project had gone far over budget after subcontractor problems. Michael had borrowed money to keep everything operating. How do you know I hear them arguing? I hated imagining Emily upstairs listening to her parents fight about money. One night, Mom said they could lose the house. My stomach tightened. Michael's house, not mine. So that's what this is about, I don't know. She looked frightened. I reached across the table. "You're not in trouble." Emily nodded. "There was another argument. When last weekend. What did you hear?" She swallowed. "Dad said, we just need to get through the closing." The kitchen suddenly seemed very quiet. Closing. Not planning. Not someday. Closing. What did Lauren say? Emily looked uncomfortable calling her mother by name, so I corrected myself. "What did your mom say?" She said, "Not if she changes her mind again." I felt something cold settle beneath my ribs. Did they say my name? No. Did they mention this house? No. That mattered. I would not turn suspicion into fact. Thomas had warned me against doing exactly that. What else? Emily hesitated. I saw a folder. What folder? Dad left it on the counter. She looked embarrassed. I wasn't snooping. I needed tape for a school project and the junk drawer is underneath that counter. I believe you. It said Mom Transition. I kept my expression still. Anything else written on it? I don't think so. Did you open it? No. I was relieved. Good. Emily frowned. Why good? Because whatever your parents are doing, I don't want you investigating them for me. But Grandma, no. I squeezed her hand. You are 17. You are their daughter and my granddaughter. You are not my detective. Her eyes filled. Are they trying to take your house? The question nearly broke me. I could have lied. Instead, I chose something between secrecy and truth. I found some paperwork that concerns me. An attorney is helping me understand it. Dad said you're forgetting things. There it was. Again. This time it hurt differently. What did he say? He said you've been overwhelmed since Grandpa died. Your grandfather died 4 years ago. I know. Do you think I'm confused? Emily shook her head immediately. No. Then trust what you know from being with me. She wiped beneath one eye. I hate this. So do I. For a moment she looked much younger than 17. I moved around the table and hugged her. Michael had once been the frightened child in my arms. That was the cruelty of loving your children. Even when they grew into adults capable of hurting you, some part of you still remembered the weight of them asleep against your chest. After Emily calmed down, I changed the subject. We talked about school college applications and a history teacher she adored. I made grilled cheese. For half an hour we were simply grandmother and granddaughter again. Then while carrying her plate to the sink, Emily stopped. Wait. What? The folder? What about it? There was a business card under it. I felt my heartbeat change. Do you remember the name, not the person's name? Anything else? She closed her eyes. It was a real estate company. Something with capital in it. Capital Ridge, maybe? She opened her phone. I searched it because the logo looked familiar. I didn't ask her to investigate further. She already had. Emily scrolled through her browser history. Here. She turned the phone toward me. Capital Ridge Realty Group, Columbus, Ohio. I wrote the name on a grocery receipt. Grandma, yes. Please don't tell Dad I told you. I looked at her. I won't. That promise tasted bitter. Families should not require 17-year-old girls to keep secrets between generations. When Emily left, I stood at the window until her car disappeared. Then I called Thomas. He answered personally. I have a name, I said. What kind of name? A real estate company. I told him what Emily had heard about the closing and the folder marked Mom Transition. Thomas was silent. Don't contact the company yourself yet. Why? Because if Michael has communicated with them, I want to know exactly what he represented before anyone has an opportunity to correct the record. You think they might have information I think it's worth asking. I looked at the grocery receipt. Thomas Michael's business is in trouble. How much trouble I don't know. Emily heard they might lose their house. That gives us possible motive. It doesn't prove conduct. I understand. And I did. But after hanging up, I walked through my house differently. I touched the dining room chair Robert had refinished, the brass handle on the cabinet, the marks on the baseboard from Emily's toy stroller years earlier. Could Michael really look at all of this and see money? That evening, I found Capitol Ridge Realty Group online. I didn't call, I only looked. Residential sales, private listings, investment properties, off-market transactions. My eyes stopped there. Off-market transactions. I closed the laptop. At 9:14, Thomas sent me a short text. Found the company. I'll make inquiries Monday. Please do nothing until then. I promised myself I would wait. But just before going upstairs, I noticed the receipt where I had written the company's name, Capitol Ridge Realty Group. A company connected somehow to a folder labeled with my role in Michael's life. Mom Transition. The funeral home had my burial arranged. The bank had been asked about my property. Michael had asked about a quitclaim deed, and now my granddaughter had heard him talking about a closing. For the first time, I no longer wondered whether those things were connected. I wondered how close Michael already was to completing whatever he had planned. Thomas called me at 11:36 Monday morning. I remember the exact time because I had spent the entire morning trying not to stare at my phone. I spoke with Capitol Ridge, he said. I put down the laundry I was folding, and there was an inquiry concerning your property. My knees weakened. I sat on the edge of the bed. From Michael, yes. Thomas explained that a real estate agent at Capitol Ridge had spoken with Michael twice during the previous month. Michael had described my house accurately. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, paid-off mortgage, large backyard, quiet neighborhood. He had even mentioned the kitchen renovation Robert and I completed 11 years earlier. What did he tell them about me? Thomas hesitated. He said his mother was preparing to transition into assisted living. I closed my eyes. The phrase sounded almost identical to Lauren's language. Simplify, transition, help, words soft enough to hide what was underneath. I never told him that. I know. Did he list the house? No. That mattered. Thomas continued. There is no executed listing agreement. Capitol Ridge did not place the property on the market. Then what was Michael doing, testing the possibility of an off-market sale? I remembered those words from the company's website. He already had someone interested, apparently. According to the agent, Michael said a private buyer might purchase the property without renovations or public showings. He told them you wanted a quiet transaction because of your age and upcoming move. My age. I said the words slowly. Suddenly, being 68 felt like evidence somebody was using against me. What price? Approximately $480,000. That number hit me almost as hard as the funeral plan. Michael knew exactly what my house was worth. What would happen to the money? That discussion apparently never reached a formal stage. I stood and walked to the window. Across the street, Daniel was carrying groceries from his truck. Normal life continued everywhere around me. Thomas, could Michael actually sell it? Not legally, without authority. There it is again. Authority. Yes, the missing piece. Thomas was quiet. We're working on that. I knew what he meant. The power of attorney. What happens now? For now, nothing happens to your house. You own it. No deed transferring ownership has been recorded. I exhaled. Then Thomas added, but Michael seems to have behaved as though he expected that problem to be solved. That frightened me more. After the call, I walked downstairs and stood in the living room. $480,000. I tried to imagine seeing my home only as that number. I couldn't. Robert and I bought it when Michael was 9. Back then, the carpet was brown, the kitchen cabinets were orange oak, and the backyard had more weeds than grass. We had been terrified by the mortgage payment. Robert painted every room himself because we couldn't afford contractors. Michael learned to ride his bicycle in the driveway. He broke his wrist falling from the maple tree at 13. We took prom photographs beside the front steps. Years later, Emily took her first steps across the same living room carpet. And now my son had apparently discussed selling it to a stranger, without asking me. That afternoon, Michael called. I stared at his name before answering. "Hi, Mom." His voice was unusually cheerful. "Hello, Michael. How are you feeling?" "Feeling. Not doing." "I'm fine. Lauren said you seemed pretty worked up last week." I was surprised. "Yeah. I told her the funeral thing was a misunderstanding." He paused. "I hope you're not still worrying about it." Thomas's instruction came back to me. "Let him believe that's all you discovered." I've had time to think. Good. I probably reacted strongly. The lie tasted bitter. Michael relaxed immediately. "I knew you would understand." That hurt. Not because he had deceived me, because he sounded relieved that I was easy to deceive. "I just don't want anybody making decisions without me," I said. "Of course not." Then he changed the subject. "Have you thought any more about downsizing?" There it was. "No. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just thinking long term. I like my house. I know. But it's a lot to maintain. I maintain it. I know, Mom." Again that patient tone. "But stairs get harder. Yard work gets harder. And there are some really nice senior communities around Columbus." "Assisted living." He laughed lightly. "Not necessarily. Independent living. Something easier." I let him talk. He mentioned maintenance, safety, social activities, less responsibility. If I hadn't known about Capitol Ridge, I might have believed this was a loving son worrying about his aging mother. Maybe part of him even believed it. That possibility made everything more painful. When we hung up, I wrote down the conversation exactly as I remembered it. Thomas had told me to document everything. The following morning he called again. This time his voice was different. "We've located more information." My hand tightened around the phone. The power of attorney. Not yet. Something connected to the attempted property transaction. Thomas explained that Michael had communicated with a title company about what documents would be required if he acted for me. He specifically asked whether an agent under a financial power of attorney could sign documents relating to a sale. I felt sick, so he knew he needed one. Yes. Did he have one? He represented that he did. I stopped breathing for a moment. When roughly 2 weeks ago, did they see it? Not at that stage, so he could have been bluffing, possibly. But neither of us believed Michael was doing all this without something in his hand. That afternoon, Emily texted me. "Are you okay?" I replied. "I'm okay. None of this is your responsibility. I love you." 3 dots appeared. "Then love you too, Grandma." I put the phone down and cried. Not because I was afraid of losing my house anymore. Thomas had made clear that nothing had transferred. I cried because 3 generations of my family were being pulled into a secret created by the middle one. Later I found Robert's photograph on the mantel. "What would you do?" I whispered. I knew what he would have said. "Follow the facts, Gracie." Robert always called me Gracie when I was scared, so I followed them. The funeral arrangement wasn't proof that Michael wanted me dead. The real estate inquiry wasn't proof that he could sell my house. The bank request wasn't proof he controlled my money. But together they revealed something more calculated. Michael was creating the appearance of a woman preparing to leave her independent life behind. Funeral plans completed. Assisted living discussed. Property documents gathered. A son handling arrangements. It was not a plan for my death. It was a plan for my transition. Except I had never agreed to transition anywhere. At 4:22 that afternoon, Thomas called for the 3rd time. "Grace, I need you to come in tomorrow." Why we received a copy of the document Michael referenced. My heart began pounding. What document? The financial power of attorney. I gripped the kitchen counter. Does it have my name? Yes. Does it have Michael's? Yes. I forced myself to ask the question that mattered most. Does it have my signature? Thomas was silent for a moment. Then he said, Grace, you need to see this in person. I didn't sleep that night, because somewhere in Columbus was a legal document giving my son power over my finances. And according to the paper, I had willingly signed it. Thomas placed the power of attorney in front of me without saying anything. For several seconds, I didn't touch it. I simply stared at my name printed across the first page. Grace Elaine Whitmore. Principal. Michael Robert Whitmore. Agent. My son had been given authority to act on my behalf in financial matters, including real estate. At least that was what the document claimed. When was this signed? I asked. Thomas pointed to the date. 6 months earlier. I recognized it immediately. The Saturday Michael brought the blue folder to my house. My stomach turned. I flipped through the pages. Banking powers, insurance matters, personal property, real estate transactions. The language seemed endless. Then I reached the final page. There it was. My signature. I knew it before Thomas asked. Grace, I touched the paper. That is my signature. You're certain? Yes. The room became silent. For days I had imagined somebody carefully copying my handwriting. But this wasn't a copy drawn by an amateur. The pressure, the curve, the slight upward finish. I had written that signature. I don't understand. Thomas pulled the blue folder toward him. Let's reconstruct that afternoon. So I did. Michael had arrived around 2. I was making soup. He had spread papers across my dining table. Yellow tabs marked the signature lines. I remembered him saying the documents concerned insurance beneficiary information and paperwork left unresolved after Robert's death. Did you read everything? The question embarrassed me. Some of it. All of it, no. It was difficult to admit. I had supervised payroll for 31 years. I had lectured employees about reading forms before signing them. Yet with my own son, I hadn't followed my own rule. Why not? Thomas asked gently. Because Michael was sitting beside me. That was the whole answer. Not because I was confused. Not because I couldn't understand legal documents. Because I trusted my child. Thomas examined the pages. Do you remember this signature page? I remember signing several pages. I don't remember this heading being above it. That distinction matters. He placed one of the insurance forms beside the power of attorney. Both had similar margins. Both used standard white paper. Both contained signature lines near the bottom. If the signature page was presented separately, or attached beneath paperwork, you believed concerned insurance, you might have signed without seeing the full document. I remembered Michael lifting pages as I signed them. Here, Mom. Another yellow tab. Just there. Then another. I had been moving between the table and stove. At one point, the timer went off. Michael had gathered some papers while I drained vegetables. I suddenly remembered something. He brought a stapler. Thomas looked up. What a black stapler. He asked if mine worked, then said never mind because he had one in his truck. Are you sure? Yes. The memory became clearer. Michael returning from outside. The blue folder under one arm. A stapler in his hand. At the time it meant nothing. Now I felt sick. Thomas studied the document again. There are several possibilities. We shouldn't decide which occurred until we have evidence. But my signature could have been moved. A genuine signed page can be incorporated into a document someone did not knowingly approve. Whether that's what happened here requires examination. I covered my face. How could I be this stupid? Thomas's voice hardened. Don't do that. I looked at him. Do what take responsibility for somebody else's deception. I signed it. You signed something. That does not automatically mean you knowingly authorized everything now attached to your signature. Tears filled my eyes. He's my son. I know. I changed his diapers. I stayed awake when he had pneumonia. Robert and I borrowed money from our retirement account when Michael started his company. My voice cracked. And now I'm sitting in a lawyer's office trying to determine how my own signature ended up giving him control over my house. Thomas let me cry. He didn't tell me everything would be fine. I appreciated that. Eventually I wiped my face. Has he used it? Yes. The answer came quietly. My tears stopped. Where? A title company. Thomas explained that Michael had presented the power of attorney during preliminary discussions concerning an off-market transaction. The title company had not completed anything. There was no recorded deed, no sale. But Michael had submitted the document as evidence that he possessed authority to act for me. He actually gave it to them, yes. So this wasn't something sitting in a drawer. No, he intended to use it. The evidence indicates he attempted to. I stood and walked toward the window. People moved along the sidewalk below. I wondered how many of them were carrying private betrayals nobody else could see. What did the title company say? They requested additional verification before proceeding. That appears to be why Michael began gathering supporting documentation. I turned around. Supporting documentation evidence consistent with the circumstances he described. I knew before Thomas explained. The funeral arrangements, the bank records, the assisted living story. Everything clicked into place. He wanted them to believe I was leaving my home. Thomas nodded. That appears possible. And the funeral plan. We don't yet know exactly how it fits. But it fits. Yes, that was enough. For the first time I understood why the scheme had seemed unnecessarily complicated. Michael couldn't simply walk into an office and announce that his mother's house was his. He needed a believable explanation. An aging widow, preparing for assisted living, organizing her final arrangements, delegating responsibility to her son, a woman stepping away from managing her own life. It sounded almost compassionate when arranged in the right order. Except the woman in that story wasn't me. I still drove. I paid my own bills. I maintained my home. I volunteered twice a month at the library. I knew every password I was supposed to know. And I had no intention of surrendering my life because my son needed money. What do we do? Thomas tapped the document. First, we formally revoke this immediately. Do it. We notify institutions that may have received it. Do it. And we preserve evidence before Michael realizes how much we've discovered. I nodded. There was no hesitation anymore. Thomas prepared the revocation. When he placed it before me, I read every word, every sentence, every line. Then I signed. This signature felt different. The same name, the same hand. But this time I knew exactly what my name was doing, taking my authority back. Before I left, Thomas handed me a copy of the power of attorney. I stared at the signature once more. 6 months earlier, I had trusted Michael enough to sign wherever he pointed. That trust had given him the weapon he needed, but he had made one mistake. He had used it, and by using it, he had left a trail. At home, I placed the document beside the funeral records and bank letter, 3 pieces of the same puzzle. Then I noticed the date on the title company's receipt Thomas had included. Michael had presented the power of attorney 9 days earlier. 9 days, while calling me, visiting me, asking whether I needed groceries, telling me he loved me. My phone rang. Michael. I stared at his name. Then I answered. Hi, Mom. Lauren and I were wondering if you'd like to come over Sunday. I looked at the document bearing my genuine signature. For the first time since this began, I understood something Michael didn't. He still believed the power of attorney worked. He still believed I knew nothing about the title company, and I was going to let him keep believing that, for now. I didn't go to Michael's house on Sunday. Instead, I invited Michael and Lauren to mine. That was Thomas's suggestion. People reveal more when they believe they're still in control, he told me. I hated thinking of dinner with my son as part of an investigation. But by then, I understood that pretending everything was normal was the safest way to learn what Michael planned next. I made pot roast. It had been his favorite since childhood. At 6:30, Michael and Lauren arrived carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of yellow roses. Michael kissed my cheek. There's my favorite mother. I'm your only mother. Still my favorite. I smiled. That was the hardest part. How was still Michael? He still knew where I kept the corkscrew. He still opened the cabinet without asking and pulled out the wine glasses Robert and I had received for our wedding. Betrayal would have been easier if love disappeared the moment someone hurt you. It doesn't. Sometimes love sits right beside suspicion at the dinner table. Lauren arranged the flowers in a vase. "These are beautiful," I said. "We thought you deserved something cheerful." Her smile was warm. I wondered whether she knew the power of attorney had already been revoked. Almost certainly not. Emily was staying with a friend that evening. I was relieved. She didn't need to witness any of this. We ate in the dining room. For the first 20 minutes, nobody mentioned my house. Michael talked about a kitchen renovation his company had completed. Lauren told me about a home she had staged in Dublin. I asked ordinary questions and tried to sound ordinary in return. Then Michael leaned back. "So, Mom, I've been thinking about what happened with the funeral home." I put down my fork. "So have I. I really am sorry. I waited. I should have talked to you first. Yes, I was trying to make things easier." Lauren touched his arm. "He worries about you more than you realize." There it was again. Concern used as a doorway. I took a sip of water. "I've been thinking maybe I overreacted." Michael's shoulders relaxed almost invisibly. "You were surprised." "I was." Lauren smiled. "That's understandable." I looked down at my plate. "I suppose there are things I should start thinking about." Neither of them spoke immediately. That silence told me more than words could have. Michael finally said, "Like what?" I shrugged. "The house. The future." "I don't know." Lauren's expression softened with such practiced sympathy that for one terrible second I wondered whether I had misjudged everything. Then she said, "You shouldn't have to manage all this alone." I looked around the dining room. All this, the house, the yard, repairs. The house hasn't needed a major repair in years. "That's wonderful," she said quickly. "But homes get harder." Michael joined in. "There are communities where you'd have no maintenance at all. Assisted living, not necessarily." He said it exactly as he had on the phone. Independent living. Something easier. I let my eyes fall toward my hands. Maybe. The word changed the room. Michael leaned forward. "You'd actually consider it," I said. "Maybe." "Of course. No pressure. No pressure." He had secretly arranged my funeral and tried to establish authority over my property, but now there was no pressure. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, what would happen to the house? Michael and Lauren exchanged a glance. It lasted less than a second. But I saw it. "Well, Michael said you'd probably sell eventually. Eventually, whenever you were ready. And who would handle that?" I could. He answered too quickly. Then he corrected himself. "I mean, I could help," Lauren added. "Michael knows contractors. I know real estate. Between us, we could make it painless." Painless. Another soft word. "What would I need to do?" Michael reached for his wine. "Nothing right now. Really. We'd take it step by step." I studied his face. The same brown eyes Robert had. The same small scar above his eyebrow from falling off his bicycle at 11. How many times had I looked into those eyes and believed I knew exactly who my son was? Would I have to list it? Not necessarily. My heartbeat quickened. Why not? Michael shrugged casually. "Sometimes private buyers make more sense. No showings. No strangers walking through your house. Capitol Ridge. Off-market transaction." I kept my expression neutral. "That sounds easier." "It can be." Lauren smiled. "And less stressful for you." There it was again. Everything was for me. My funeral, my move, my house sale, my disappearing authority, all apparently designed for my comfort. I stood and collected the plates because I needed a moment away from them. At the kitchen sink, my hands trembled. Michael followed, carrying serving dishes. "You okay?" "Fine. You seem tired." "I cooked dinner for 3 people." He smiled. "That's why I'm saying you should make life easier." I turned toward him. For one dangerous I wanted to ask, easier for whom? Instead, I said, "Maybe you're right." His face changed. Not much. But enough. Hope. Michael was hoping I would surrender. After dessert, he became more specific. "There are a few things we'd want to get organized if you ever decided to move, such as title documents, insurance, tax records." I almost admired the careful way he said it. You seem to know a lot about this. It's part of construction. I deal with property paperwork all the time, Lauren added. And there's no reason to rush. Michael nodded. We've got time. Then he glanced at Lauren. She looked at him. Something passed between them. I waited. Michael continued. I mean, ideally, if you wanted to simplify things, we could get most of it handled before the end of the month. The end of the month. Emily's words echoed in my head. We just need to get it through the closing. I tilted my head. Why the end of the month? Michael froze for half a beat. No particular reason. Then why mention it just because paperwork can drag on? Lauren stepped in. And Michael's schedule gets crazy next month. That answer came too quickly, too. I smiled. Well, I'm not promising anything. Of course not, Michael said. But disappointment flashed across his face. After they left, I locked the door and stood in the silent hallway. The yellow roses sat on my dining table. They suddenly looked like flowers someone might send to a hospital. Or a funeral. I hated myself for thinking that. I carried them into the kitchen anyway. Then I opened the notebook where I had been documenting conversations. I wrote everything down. Private buyer, title documents, end of month. No need to list publicly. At 9:42, I called Thomas. He has a deadline. What makes you say that? I told him about dinner. Thomas listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, That fits something I learned today. My hand tightened around the phone. What the title company Michael contacted has an open preliminary file connected with a proposed private transaction. I stopped breathing. There's already a buyer. It appears there is an interested party. Who we're still confirming that. And the closing. No closing can lawfully proceed on the basis of revoked authority once the relevant parties are notified. I felt relief. Then Thomas added, But Michael may not know that yet. I looked toward the dining room where my son had just sat discussing my future, as though it belonged to him. When was the transaction supposed to happen? Thomas paused. Before the end of this month. So Michael hadn't been speaking hypothetically. He wasn't helping me consider a future sale. He was preparing me emotionally for a decision he had already started making. I walked to the front window. His truck was gone. The street was empty. And for the first time, I understood exactly why Michael had looked disappointed when I refused to commit. Somewhere someone was waiting to buy my home, and my son believed all he needed was enough time to convince everyone that I had already agreed. The next piece of the truth arrived in a plain manila envelope. Thomas called first. I've been reviewing the business records we can legally access, he said. Michael's financial situation is worse than we thought. How much worse, I'd rather show you. An hour later, I was sitting across from him again. He placed several pages on the desk. Whitmore Residential Contracting had once been a healthy business. Michael employed 6 people full-time and hired subcontractors when needed. Robert had been enormously proud of him. So had I. But the numbers Thomas showed me told a different story. 2 projects had gone badly. The first involved a large renovation where a dispute over workmanship delayed final payment. The second was worse. Material prices increased after Michael signed the contract, and problems with a subcontractor forced him to redo thousands of dollars of work. To cover payroll and existing obligations, Michael borrowed. Then borrowed again. He personally guaranteed part of this debt, Thomas said. What does that mean for him? If the company can't satisfy certain obligations, creditors may pursue him, personally, within the terms of those guarantees. I looked at the figures. They were larger than I expected. How much does he need? Thomas pointed to several entries. We can't know exactly what would resolve everything, but the immediate pressure appears substantial. And my house is worth about $480,000. Yes. The connection was obvious. I leaned back. So that's it. It's a possible motive. He wants to sell my house to save his business. That's what the evidence increasingly suggests. I should have felt only anger. Instead, an old memory came to me. Michael at 29 standing in my kitchen with his first contractor's license. Robert had opened a bottle of champagne. You built this yourself, he'd told our son. Michael had looked so proud. Now that business was collapsing. And somewhere along the way, Desperation had convinced him that my home was an emergency fund waiting to be unlocked. Does Lauren know how bad it is? Probably. We don't have enough evidence to determine who initiated the plan. That question had been troubling me. Lauren understood real estate. She had been the one repeatedly talking about my memory. She knew how to make manipulation sound like concern. Part of me wanted her to be responsible. It would have been easier. A daughter-in-law corrupting my son was a story I could survive. My son choosing this himself was harder. Thomas seemed to read my thoughts. Don't decide yet who persuaded whom. I know. Follow the evidence. That's what Robert would say. Thomas smiled faintly. Robert usually did. I left with copies of the relevant records. That afternoon, Emily came by after school. She seemed tired. Everything okay at home, I asked. She shrugged. Dad sleeps on the couch sometimes. I didn't press. She opened the refrigerator. That small act relieved me more than it should have. At least today she was hungry. I made turkey sandwiches while she sat at the counter. Grandma, yes. Are you mad at Dad? I stopped slicing a tomato. I'm hurt. That's not what I asked. I looked at her. Yes, I'm angry. She nodded. He's scared. The knife stopped again. What makes you say that? I heard him crying. Michael rarely cried. Even at Robert's funeral, he had fought his tears until the cemetery. When Tuesday night, Emily stared at her sandwich. He told Mom he was going to lose everything. My heart tightened. What did she say? That they needed another solution. And he said there wasn't one. I sat beside her. Emily, you don't have to keep telling me things you hear. I know. I mean it. She nodded. Then she said, I don't think Dad wants to hurt you. There are sentences that can break your heart precisely because you want them to be true. I don't think he wakes up wanting to hurt me either. Then why is this happening? I searched for an answer a 17-year-old could carry. Sometimes people become so frightened of losing what they built that they convince themselves they're entitled to use something that isn't theirs. My dad isn't a bad person. No. She looked surprised. You don't think he is? I think he's doing something very wrong. Those aren't always the same thing. That distinction mattered to me. Michael's actions were wrong, deliberate, deceptive. But I wasn't ready to erase 43 years of his humanity because of them. That didn't mean I would rescue him. The next morning, Michael called. Mom, random question. I nearly laughed. Nothing he asked felt random anymore. What do you remember what you and Dad paid for the house? I closed my eyes. Why? I was talking to somebody about how much property values have changed. About 200,000. That's incredible. Yes, you guys made a great investment. Investment, not home. What do you think it's worth now? He asked. I haven't thought about it. I'd guess close to 500. He already knew. Capitol Ridge had estimated roughly $480,000. Maybe. If you ever sold, you'd be in a really comfortable position. I already am comfortable. Silence. Then he laughed. You know what I mean. Yes. I was beginning to know exactly what he meant. After we hung up, I wrote down the conversation. That evening, I sat alone in Robert's chair. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine Michael losing his company, his employees leaving, his reputation damaged, maybe even his house at risk. Every maternal instinct in me screamed the same thing it had screamed since the day he was born. Help him. I could sell investments. I could lend him money. I could even sell the house voluntarily. But then another thought followed. If I rescued Michael now, I wouldn't be saving him from an accident. I would be rewarding him for secretly trying to take the rescue without my consent. There was a difference. The next afternoon, my phone rang. Heritage Grove Funeral Home. Rebecca. Mrs. Whitmore. I'm sorry to bother you again. What's happened? Our internal review found something in your file that I believe you and your attorney need to see. I sat upright. What a request your son made after the arrangements were entered. What kind of request? Rebecca hesitated. He asked us for a formal confirmation letter stating that your final arrangements were in place. I frowned. Why, that is what concerned me. She lowered her voice. Because he specifically requested language confirming that you had completed end-of-life planning and authorized him as the family contact. The room went cold. Did you give it to him? A basic confirmation was generated before I spoke with you. My grip tightened around the phone. Rebecca, why would he need proof that my funeral was planned? I don't know. But suddenly I did. Or at least I understood the question we had been asking incorrectly. The funeral wasn't only something Michael had arranged. He had needed documentation showing that it existed. He had needed somebody else to believe that Grace Whitmore was preparing for the end of her independent life. And if that letter had gone where I feared it had gone, my burial wasn't the destination of Michael's plan. It was evidence. Rebecca emailed the confirmation letter to Thomas that afternoon. By 4 o'clock, I was sitting in his office reading it. The letter was only one page. That was what disturbed me most. Something so ordinary had been used to make a lie look respectable. Heritage Grove Funeral Home confirmed that prearrangements had been established for Grace Elaine Whitmore, including burial beside her deceased husband, and that Michael Whitmore was listed as the primary family contact. Nothing in the letter said I was dying. Nothing said I was incompetent. Nothing said I had agreed to sell my house. It didn't have to. Placed beside everything else, it created an impression. Thomas laid several documents across his conference table. Look at them in sequence. First came an inquiry Michael had made to an assisted living community. My name appeared on the information request. Then the power of attorney. Then the request for property documents. Then the funeral confirmation. Finally, preliminary communications with the title company. I stared at the papers. Each document alone could have an innocent explanation. Together they told a story. Grace Whit was 68. Grace Whitmore was preparing for assisted living. Grace Whitmore had completed funeral arrangements. Grace Whitmore had delegated financial responsibility to her son. Grace Whitmore was preparing to dispose of her home. Except Grace Whitmore had done none of those things. He built a version of me, I whispered. Thomas looked at me. Yes, a woman who's finished living independently. I would phrase it more cautiously in a legal setting, but essentially yes. These documents support the narrative Michael appears to have presented. I touched the funeral letter. Why would the title company care about this context? Thomas explained that unusual property transactions often generated questions, especially when one person claimed authority to act for another. Michael needed the power of attorney. But when additional verification was requested, he apparently began gathering material that made his explanation seem plausible. My mother is transitioning out of her home. My mother has completed end-of-life planning. My mother wants me to handle everything. The lies didn't need to say I was incapable. They only needed to make Michael's control seem normal. What about Lauren? Thomas slid another group of pages toward me. These are copies of communications associated with the false email account. I recognized the address immediately, the one pretending to be mine. Several messages had been sent to Heritage Grove. Others had gone to an assisted living community. Thomas pointed to similarities in wording. The messages used phrases Lauren had spoken directly to me. Simplify things. Transition comfortably. Reduce responsibilities. Lauren wrote them. It appears likely that she participated in preparing. Likely we don't have direct proof of who physically typed every message. I nodded. Then Thomas showed me something else. An email from Michael's personal account to the title company. It referenced the power of attorney. Another message asked what additional documents might be helpful. Another confirmed that his mother was in the process of transitioning from independent home ownership. Michael. Not Lauren. I felt a painful disappointment settle over me. Some stubborn part of my heart had still been waiting for evidence that Lauren had engineered everything and Michael had simply followed. But his name was everywhere. His requests, his representations, his power of attorney, his proposed transaction. He knew, I said. Thomas didn't answer. He knew exactly what he was doing. The documents indicate he was actively involved. That was lawyer language. I appreciated it. It prevented my emotions from running faster than the evidence. But I no longer needed emotional guesses. My son had personally taken the power of attorney to a title company. He had personally asked the county about a quitclaim deed. He had personally contacted Heritage Grove. Whatever Lauren's role was, Michael wasn't an innocent passenger. He was driving. I stood and walked toward the window. Do you think he expected me to move after the sale? Thomas took a moment. I don't know. That question haunted me. Suppose Michael had succeeded. Suppose the transaction closed. What then? Would he have told me the house had already been sold? Would he have claimed I had forgotten agreeing? Would he have shown me my own signature? Would Lauren have gently reminded me that my memory wasn't what it used to be? The thought made me nauseous. I want this stopped. It is being stopped. No, I mean completely. Thomas nodded. The title company has received formal notice that the power of attorney is revoked and disputed, so they know now. Does Michael not necessarily? I turned. Why wouldn't they tell him they may? But there's another option. I waited. Thomas folded his hands. The proposed transaction hasn't formally closed. Michael still appears to believe he can satisfy the remaining requirements. What are you suggesting, that we let the scheduled meeting proceed? I stared at him. You want him to try? I want him to arrive believing he still controls the situation. My heart began beating faster. Isn't that dangerous? Not if the title company is cooperating, and no documents can be executed under disputed authority. What would be the purpose to establish exactly what Michael intends to represent when he believes you're not present? I thought about Sunday dinner. His calm voice, private buyer, no showings, before the end of the month. He had sat at my table and talked about a transaction already moving forward. When is the meeting? Friday morning. 3 days away. I sat again. What would I have to do? Nothing yet. Thomas looked directly at me. Grace, I need you to be certain. This may be emotionally difficult. I almost laughed. My son arranged my funeral to help sell my house. I think we've passed emotionally difficult. Thomas didn't smile. Seeing someone you love confronted with evidence is different from discovering it privately. I knew he was right. For a moment I pictured Michael as a little boy standing in the kitchen with a broken lamp behind him. I had always known when he was lying. Back then his ears turned red. I wondered whether they still did. What happens if I don't go? The transaction remains blocked. Your property is protected. So I don't need to confront him to save the house, no. That mattered. This wasn't revenge. I didn't need to humiliate Michael. I could walk away. But then I thought about the false version of me he had created. Forgetful Grace. Dependent Grace. Grace who needed others to speak for her. Grace who had apparently planned everything except her own right to say no. No, I said. Thomas raised an eyebrow. No what? No more letting other people speak for me. His expression softened. I want to be there Friday. All right. On my way home, Rebecca called. I wanted to personally apologize again. You didn't do this, but our letter became part of it. Your phone call stopped it. There was silence. Then Rebecca said, There's something else you should know. When your son requested the confirmation letter, he asked whether we could specifically state that the arrangements had been made at your direction. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Did you? No, our records didn't support wording that strong. That single decision might have protected me more than Rebecca realized. Thank you. After I hung up, I pulled into my driveway. My house stood exactly where it always had. Brick walls, white trim, Robert's maple tree rising behind it. Friday morning, Michael planned to walk into a title office believing he could speak for the woman who owned that house. He believed Grace Whitmore would be somewhere else, quiet, unaware. Perhaps confused. He was wrong, because when the meeting began, the one person Michael never expected to see would be sitting across the table. Me. Friday morning, I dressed as if I were going to church. Navy dress, pearl earrings, the gold watch Robert gave me on our 30th anniversary. I wanted no one in that room to see the confused old woman Michael had described. Thomas picked me up at 9:15. You can still change your mind, he said. I've changed my mind enough for one lifetime. The title company occupied a suite in a modern office building north of downtown Columbus. Thomas had arranged for us to wait in a smaller conference room. Through the wall I could hear voices. At 9:57 Michael arrived. I recognized his laugh. Lauren was with him. Another man's voice belonged to the prospective buyer, a local investor interested in purchasing the house privately. Thomas looked at his watch. Ready, no. He waited. I stood, but I'm going anyway. At 10:08 we entered the conference room. Michael saw Thomas first. Then he saw me. His face emptied. Mom Lauren's mouth opened. Nobody moved. I walked to the empty chair opposite Michael and sat down. Good morning, Mom. What are you doing here? I placed my purse beside me. I believe the better question is what you're doing here. His ears turned red. Some things never change. The title representative, a woman named Susan, closed the door. Thomas sat beside me. Michael looked from him to me. This isn't what it looks like. I almost smiled. Then tell me what it looks like. Lauren spoke first. Grace, maybe we should discuss this privately. No, please. No, Lauren. My voice remained calm. That is how we got here. Too many things were discussed privately without me. The buyer shifted uncomfortably. I was told Mrs. Whitmore had authorized the sale. I did not, I said. Michael leaned forward. Mom, nobody was selling anything today. Thomas opened a folder. The preliminary transaction file indicates otherwise. Michael looked at him. Who are you? You know who I am. I prepared your parents' estate documents years ago. Recognition crossed Michael's face, then fear. Thomas placed the revocation document on the table. Any financial power of attorney naming you as Grace Whitmore's agent has been formally revoked and disputed. Michael stared at the paper. Before today. Lauren whispered Michael. He ignored her. Mom, you don't understand. I understand that you presented a power of attorney I never knowingly gave you. You signed it. The words came quickly. Too quickly. Yes, I said. I signed a page you placed among documents you told me were insurance papers. Michael looked away. Thomas placed another document down. The title company has also been notified of the circumstances surrounding that signature. The buyer stood. I think I'm done here. Michael turned toward him. Wait. This is a family misunderstanding. The man shook his head. I was told ownership and authority were settled. They are settled, I said. Everyone looked at me. I own the house. The buyer nodded once. That's all I needed to know. He left. Michael watched the door close as though hundreds of thousands of dollars had just walked through it. Maybe in his mind they had. Then he turned on me. Do you have any idea what you've done? That question finally cracked something inside me. What I've done. My voice rose for the first time. I woke up one morning and received a telephone call asking me to confirm my own burial. Michael looked down. I went to a funeral home I'd never visited and found my signature on paperwork I never approved. Mom, I found an email account pretending to be me. My bank received requests I didn't make. A real estate company was told I was moving into assisted living. And you walked into this office carrying authority I never knowingly gave you. Silence. Then Lauren spoke. This was never supposed to hurt you. I turned toward her. You told me I was forgetting things. Her face tightened. I said you seemed forgetful. You were preparing an explanation. No. If I objected, I was confused. If I remembered differently, I was forgetful. If I resisted, I was overwhelmed. Lauren looked at Michael. Tell her. Michael rubbed both hands over his face. I was trying to fix a problem. With my house. I was going to put everything back. That sentence stopped me. Put everything back. As though my home were $20 borrowed from my purse. Thomas remained silent. Michael continued. The business is drowning. I have obligations, employees, loans. And that gave you the right to sell my house. I wasn't stealing it. What do you call selling something that doesn't belong to you? His face flushed. I was going to repay you. Lauren suddenly laughed. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. Don't do that, Michael. He turned. Do what make this sound like it was all some temporary loan. You agreed we needed a solution. I agreed we were desperate. You set up half the paperwork. The room went still. Lauren stared at him. And you told me your mother would never read it. Michael froze. So did I. Lauren realized what she had said. But it was too late. I looked at my son. You said that, Mom. Did you tell her I would never read the paperwork? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I felt strangely calm. For weeks I had been searching for the exact moment when desperation became betrayal. Now I had found it. It was the moment Michael decided my trust made me easy to use. Thomas placed the Heritage Grove records on the table. Then the bank documentation. Then the real estate inquiry. Then the disputed power of attorney. One by one. A paper trail of my disappearance from my own life. Susan, the title representative, spoke firmly. This transaction will not proceed. Michael's shoulders dropped. Whatever fantasy he had maintained until that morning finally collapsed. There will be no transfer, she continued. Any future transaction involving this property will require Mrs. Whitmore's direct authorization. Direct authorization. 2 beautiful words. Michael looked at me. Mom, please. I opened my purse. There was one more thing I had brought. Not because Thomas told me to, because I had found it the previous night while reviewing everything on my phone. I placed my phone on the table. Michael frowned. What is that, a voicemail? His face changed. 3 weeks earlier, Michael had called while I was volunteering at the library. He had left a message asking me to call him. At least that was what I thought the message contained. But he hadn't disconnected properly. After several seconds of silence, voices continued in the background. His voice. Lauren's voice. Nearly 2 minutes of conversation neither of them knew my voicemail had recorded. I hadn't listened beyond the first 30 seconds until the previous night. Now Michael stared at the phone as though he already understood. What voicemail? I looked directly into my son's eyes. The one where you forgot to hang up. For the first time that morning, Michael didn't try to explain. He simply went pale. Because whatever he thought he could still deny was sitting on the table between us. And this time the evidence wasn't written in my name. It was spoken in his own voice. Michael stared at my phone. For several seconds, nobody in the conference room moved. Then he looked at me. Mom, you don't need to play that here. His voice was quiet now. The anger was gone. That frightened little boy look had returned to his face. I think I do. Lauren folded her arms. What exactly is on it? I looked at her. You don't remember, no. Michael did. I could tell. I pressed play. His recorded voice filled the room. Hey Mom, it's me. Call me when you get this. Nothing urgent. Love you. Then came silence. 7 seconds. 8. 9. I had originally stopped listening there. But the recording continued. There was movement in the background. Then Lauren's voice farther away. Did she agree? Michael answered. Not yet. Lauren said something I couldn't make out. Then Michael's voice became clearer. She won't agree if we tell her everything at once. My stomach tightened, even though I had already heard it the night before. Lauren shifted in her chair. Michael stared at the table. The recording continued. We get the paperwork handled first. Once the business is stable, I'll put the money back. Lauren's voice came next. And if she finds out before then, Michael sighed. She won't. Mom trusts me. Those 3 words hurt more the second time. Mom trusts me. The recording continued. Lauren said, You're assuming she'll go along with the move. She will eventually. You don't know that. She doesn't need that whole house anymore. Then came the sentence that had kept me awake all night. I'll fix it before she ever knows there was anything to fix. I stopped the recording. Nobody spoke. I looked at Michael. Tell me what I misunderstood. His eyes filled with tears. Mom, no. Tell me. He couldn't. Lauren turned toward him. You said the power of attorney gave you temporary control. Michael snapped. You knew what we were doing. I knew you were trying to get financing. With what? She didn't answer. With what? Lauren, stop. No. You don't get to pretend now. Thomas raised one hand. This isn't the place to determine blame between the two of you. But I had heard enough. For weeks I had wondered whether Michael was confused, desperate, manipulated, maybe even convinced that I had somehow agreed. The voicemail destroyed that hope. She won't agree if we tell her everything. That meant he knew. From the beginning. He knew my answer would be no. So he had decided my answer wasn't necessary. Why, I asked. Michael looked at me. I told you. No. You told me about the debt. I'm asking why you believed you had the right. I didn't think of it like that. How did you think of it? He pressed both palms against his eyes. I thought I could fix everything. With my house. With the equity. The equity belongs to me. I know. Do you? He looked up. I wasn't going to keep it. There it was again. The justification he had built his entire conscience around. Temporary. I needed enough to get through the next few months, he said. There are receivables coming. 2 projects are supposed to pay out. I could have replaced the money, and if you couldn't, I would have. That isn't an answer. I would have figured it out. I almost laughed. You couldn't figure out your own debt, so your solution was to gamble with my home. His face crumpled. I was trying to save my family. I am your family. The words silenced him. Even Lauren looked away. I continued. Emily is your family. Lauren is your family. And I am your family too. You don't protect one part of a family by stealing choices from another. I wasn't stealing from you. You planned to sell something I owned without telling me. I thought you'd understand afterward. After what? After strangers owned my house, you could have moved somewhere beautiful. I stared at him. I already live somewhere beautiful. He looked down. My house may not have a clubhouse or a dining room or somebody mowing the lawn, Michael. But it contains 34 years of my life. My voice shook. Your father died there. Michael closed his eyes. I know. No. You knew the address. You forgot what the house meant. That finally made him cry. Not dramatically, his shoulders simply dropped and tears ran down his face. I wanted to reach for him. That instinct shocked me. After everything, part of me still wanted to comfort my son. I kept my hands in my lap. What about the funeral, I asked. He wiped his face. I needed supporting documents. So you planned my burial. I called to ask about pre-arrangements. They needed information. Lauren helped with the emails. Lauren shook her head. You were the one who wanted the confirmation letter. I know. Michael looked at me. The title company kept asking questions about why I was handling everything. I thought if I could show them you were organizing your affairs. You mean if you could make me look like I was preparing to disappear? No. That is exactly what you did. I never wanted you dead. His voice broke. I need you to believe that. And strangely, I did. That was the final twist in the knife. Michael hadn't planned my funeral because he wanted me buried. He had planned it because a living, healthy, independent mother was inconvenient to the story he needed other people to believe. He needed a mother who was stepping away, a mother preparing for the end, a mother who had willingly handed control to her son. So he created one on paper. I believe you didn't want me dead, I said. Relief flickered across his face. Then I continued. But that doesn't make what you did acceptable. The relief vanished. You didn't have to wish me dead to erase me. Michael lowered his head. Thomas quietly gathered the documents. The title representative confirmed once more that the transaction was terminated. There would be no closing, no sale, no transfer. Michael's financial crisis remained exactly where it had been before he tried to use me to solve it. As we prepared to leave, he touched my arm. Mom. I stepped back. That movement hurt both of us. What happens now? I knew what he was asking. Would I report him? Would I remove him from my will? Would I help with the debt anyway? Would I forgive him? I had answers to none of those questions yet. But I knew one thing. You face what you created. His lips trembled. Does that mean you're done with me? I looked at the man who had once been the baby I carried home from the hospital. No. His eyes lifted. But it means I'm done saving you from every consequence. I walked out with Thomas. Outside, the morning sun was painfully bright. For weeks I had been trying to understand whether my son intended to destroy me. Now I knew the truth was more complicated. Michael loved me, and Michael had betrayed me. Both things could exist at the same time. That was perhaps the hardest truth of all. Because monsters are easy to walk away from. Children you still love are not. But love, I was beginning to understand, did not require me to hand Michael another chance to decide what belonged to him. My house was mine. My signature was mine. My future was mine. And whatever happened to Michael next, I would not pay for his choices by surrendering my own. For 3 days after the title office confrontation, Michael did not call me. I didn't call him either. The silence was painful, but it was also necessary. For most of Michael's life, whenever he fell, I rushed toward him. When he was 7, I cleaned his scraped knees. When he was 19 and wrecked his first car, Robert and I helped him replace it. When his business struggled during its first year, we lent him money without interest. Somewhere along the way, helping my son had become automatic. This time I did something different. I let him fall. On Monday morning, I met Thomas to finish protecting my affairs. We updated my trust and estate documents. The revoked power of attorney was formally distributed to the relevant institutions. My bank added additional verification requirements. The title company permanently noted the disputed document. Thomas also helped me make sure no future transfer of my home could occur without my direct participation. When we reached my will, he paused. "Have you decided what you want to do about Michael?" I looked at his name. My only child. For several minutes I said nothing. I don't want revenge. Then don't make estate decisions for revenge. I also don't want him believing everything eventually becomes his simply because he's my son. Thomas nodded. That is a different concern. We revised the structure so that my wishes were clearer and better protected. Emily's educational provision remained secure. Any future changes would be mine alone. When I finished signing, Thomas asked, "How do you feel older?" He smiled faintly. "Anything else free." That surprised both of us. I had spent weeks feeling as though my age were something being used to shrink me. Now I understood that being 68 also meant I had 68 years of experience telling me when something was wrong. The reports regarding the disputed documents also moved forward. I provided statements where required. Heritage Grove preserved its records. The bank documented the unauthorized inquiry. The title company retained everything Michael had submitted. I didn't demand that anyone destroy him. I simply stopped protecting him from what he had done. That distinction became important very quickly. Michael's business failed within weeks. Without the money he had expected from my house, he couldn't meet the obligations coming due. One afternoon, Emily called me crying. Dad closed the office. I sat down. "Is he home?" "Yes." "Are you safe?" "Yes." That was all I needed to know. I wanted desperately to drive over. I didn't. Later I learned Michael had sold 2 company vehicles and several pieces of equipment. Employees were let go. Creditors began pursuing what they were legally owed. The empire he had spent 12 years building collapsed in less than a month. I grieved for him, but I did not write a check. Lauren took Emily to stay with her sister for several weeks. Their marriage had become another casualty of the lies. Lauren sent me one message. "I'm sorry for my part in what happened." I read it several times. Then I replied, "I hope you and Michael both take responsibility for your own choices. Please keep Emily out of the middle." That was all. I wasn't ready for forgiveness. But I was finished with hatred before it could begin. Michael finally came to my house on a rainy Thursday evening. He looked 10 years older. His beard had grown in unevenly. His clothes were wrinkled. When I opened the door, neither of us spoke. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked into the living room, but didn't sit until I did. For a while, rain against the windows was the only sound. "The company is gone," he said. "I heard. The bank is coming after me on the guarantees. I'm sorry." His eyes snapped toward mine. "Are you?" "Yes. You could stop some of it." There it was. Even now. My heart sank. "With money, you have investments." I stared at him. He looked ashamed immediately. I shouldn't have said that. "No, Michael, I'm glad you did. Mom. Because that's the problem." He rubbed his face. What problem you still see what I have as the solution to what you've done? I don't mean it like that. How do you mean it? He couldn't answer. I leaned forward. Your father and I helped you start that company. I know. We helped with your first equipment loan. I know. When you couldn't make payroll that first winter, we covered it. His eyes filled. I remember. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing those things as gifts. He looked at me. You started seeing them as evidence that I would always rescue you. He lowered his head. I continued. My house became your emergency plan because you assumed it would belong to you someday anyway. Michael flinched. That isn't fair. Isn't it? I never thought you owed me the house. Then why did you believe you could borrow against its value without asking me? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That silence lasted a long time. Finally, he whispered, because I thought it was basically going to be mine eventually. There it was. The ugliest truth spoken plainly. Not hatred, not greed alone. Entitlement. I felt tears come. Michael began crying too. I hear how horrible that sounds. Good. He looked startled. I need you to hear it. I was scared. I know. I had employees depending on me. Lauren was terrified we'd lose our house. Emily was talking about college. Everything was falling apart. And you chose me to absorb the fall. His face crumpled. Yes. The word was barely audible. For the first time he stopped explaining. No excuses. No temporary loan. No promise to replace the money. Just yes. Something inside me softened. Not enough to erase what happened. Enough to see my son again. I love you, I said. Michael began sobbing. I had not intended to say it. But it was true. I love you too. I know. He looked at me hopefully. Then I said the harder part. But I will not pay your debts. The hope disappeared. I continued before guilt could stop me. I will not mortgage this house. I will not sell investments to save your business. I will not undo the consequences of what you chose. He wiped his face. What am I supposed to do? What every adult does when life collapses. I held his gaze. Start again. He laughed bitterly. At 43, I became a widow at 64. That silenced him. I learned how to wake up in an empty bed. I learned how to eat dinner alone. I learned how to make decisions without the man I'd made them with for 40 years. My voice trembled. Do not tell me 43 is too old to start again. Michael looked down. After a while, he nodded. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door. Yes. Will you ever forgive me? I looked at him. The answer wasn't simple. I hope so. His face fell slightly. But forgiveness isn't the same as pretending it didn't happen. I know. And trust won't come back because you apologize. I know. You'll have to rebuild it. He nodded. Then he left. I watched his truck disappear through the rain. For the first time since Heritage Grove called, I felt no need to chase after anything. Not explanations. Not evidence. Not my son. I had saved my home. But more importantly, I had saved something I hadn't realized I was in danger of losing. The right to let the people I love face their own consequences, and the right to love them without surrendering myself. 6 months later, I was still living in my house. That sentence may not sound extraordinary. To me it was. Every morning I came downstairs, opened the kitchen blinds, made coffee, and looked out at the maple tree Robert had planted. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been transferred. Nobody had packed my belongings or decided where I would spend the remaining years of my life. The house was still mine. But I had changed. For weeks after everything happened, I checked my bank account almost obsessively. Every unfamiliar envelope made my heart jump. Trust once broken leaves strange habits behind. Eventually, the fear faded. Michael found a salaried position with a larger construction company outside Columbus. He wasn't the owner anymore. That was difficult for him. The first time he told me about his new supervisor, I heard humiliation in his voice. Then he said something that surprised me. Maybe I needed to learn how to work for somebody again. He had begun counseling too. I didn't ask what he discussed there. That was his work to do. His creditors didn't disappear because he was sorry. He arranged repayment plans where he could and dealt with the consequences where he couldn't. His lifestyle changed dramatically. The expensive truck disappeared, vacations disappeared, so did the illusion that one clever transaction could rescue everything. I never gave him money. Some nights that decision still hurt. There is a particular kind of guilt mothers carry when we possess the ability to make our children's pain smaller and choose not to. But I learned to ask myself a different question. Would my help make Michael stronger, or would it teach him that if he pushed far enough, I would eventually rescue him? That question usually gave me my answer. Lauren and Michael were still together, although barely at first. Lauren had returned home with Emily after several weeks apart. They entered marriage counseling. Lauren and I remained polite but distant. She apologized to me in person once. We were standing in my kitchen. I should never have participated, she said. No. I was scared. So was Michael. She nodded. I kept telling myself we were helping everyone avoid a disaster. You were avoiding your disaster by creating one for me. Tears filled her eyes. I know. I didn't hug her. But I didn't punish her either. I hope you become someone who never makes that choice again. That was the closest thing to forgiveness I could offer then. Emily graduated from high school in May. When she walked across the stage, I cried so hard that Daniel, sitting beside me, handed me his handkerchief. Michael sat several rows away with Lauren. After the ceremony, we all gathered for photographs. For one uncomfortable moment, nobody knew where to stand. Then Emily grabbed my hand. "Grandma, you're next to me." So I stood beside her. Michael stood on her other side. When the camera clicked, I realized something. A family photograph doesn't prove a family is perfect. Sometimes it simply proves that people survived long enough to stand beside each other again. A week after graduation, another envelope arrived from Heritage Grove Funeral Home. My hands trembled when I saw the return address. Then I opened it. Rebecca had sent formal confirmation that the unauthorized prearrangement had been canceled and the associated records marked accordingly. At the bottom, she had written a short note by hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, I hope the next arrangements made for your life are entirely your own." I smiled. Then I placed the letter in the drawer of Robert's old desk. I didn't throw it away. I wanted to remember. Not Michael's betrayal, my response to it. That phone call had begun with somebody asking me to confirm my burial. Instead, it forced me to confirm something else. That I was still here, still capable, still entitled to decide what happened next. Several weeks later, I did something that surprised everyone. I made an appointment with a different funeral home. This time I went alone. I sat with a woman named Carol and discussed exactly what I wanted someday. A simple service. No expensive casket. Amazing Grace could stay. Robert would have liked that. I chose burial beside him. When Carol slid the paperwork toward me, I read every page, every paragraph, every sentence. Then I signed my name. Not because anyone frightened me into planning for death. Because death no longer frightened me as much as losing control of my life. There was power in making the decision myself. Afterward, I stopped at the cemetery. Robert's stone looked exactly as it always did. I brushed grass from the edge and sat on the bench nearby. "You would have been furious with him," I said. A breeze moved through the trees. "But you would have wanted me to leave a door open." That was the kind of man Robert had been. Firm without being cruel. I was learning. Michael and I did not return to what we had been. Maybe we never would. He no longer had a key to my house. He had no access to my accounts. He was not authorized to sign anything for me. Those boundaries remained. But he began visiting again. At first our conversations were awkward. Then one Saturday he came over and noticed a loose board on the back steps. "Want me to fix that?" I looked at him. "Are you asking permission?" He smiled sadly. "Yes, Mom." I handed him the toolbox. We worked together for an hour. When we finished, he sat beside me on the porch. "I still can't believe what I did." "I can." He looked surprised. "I need to be able to believe it happened," I said. "Otherwise, I can't believe you've changed." He nodded. After a while, he asked, "Do you trust me? Not the way I used to." His face fell. "But more than 6 months ago." He looked at me. "That will have to be enough, for now." We sat quietly. I didn't need him to become innocent again. I needed him to become honest. That was possible. As evening settled over the neighborhood, Michael left and I remained on the porch. Daniel waved from across the street. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. Somebody nearby was grilling dinner. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. I thought about the woman Michael had created on paper. Old, forgetful, preparing to disappear. She had never existed. I was 68 years old. I had gray in my hair, reading glasses in every room, and knees that complained when rain was coming. But I was not finished. Age had not transferred ownership of my life to my child. Motherhood had not turned my possessions into an advance inheritance. Love had not erased my right to say no. And forgiveness did not require me to surrender the boundaries that saved me. That morning, months earlier, a funeral home had called to confirm my burial. Now, sitting beneath an Ohio sunset on the porch of the home that was still mine, I understood the strange gift hidden inside that terrible call. Someone else had tried to plan the ending of my story. Instead, they reminded me that I was still the one writing it. Ketuk Fan 15. The greatest lesson I learned was that love and boundaries are not enemies. For most of my life, I believed being a good mother meant giving whenever my child needed me. Time, money, forgiveness, another chance. But there is a difference between helping someone stand and allowing them to stand on you. Michael loved me. I believe that. He also betrayed me. Accepting both truths was painful, but necessary. People we love are capable of making terrible choices, especially when fear convinces them that the end justifies the means. Forgiveness does not require pretending those choices never happened. Sometimes forgiveness means leaving the door open while changing the locks. Sometimes love means saying, "I will not save you from this." And sometimes the most important person you must finally protect is yourself. If you are older and someone has begun speaking over you, making decisions for you, treating your possessions as though they already belong to the next generation, remember this: your home is still yours. Your savings are still yours. Your signature is still yours. Your voice is still yours. And your future belongs to you for as long as you are here to choose it. Growing older does not make you a supporting character in somebody else's life. You remain the author of your own. If you were in my position, could you have forgiven Michael? Or would his betrayal have crossed a line you could never come back from? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read stories like yours because sometimes another person's experience helps someone realize they are not alone. And if this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal, courage, consequences, and finding the strength to choose yourself again. Wherever you're watching from tonight, thank you for spending this time with me. And remember, protecting your boundaries doesn't mean you've stopped loving your family. Sometimes it means you've finally remembered to love yourself too. What happened to Grace reminds us of something many people learn only after years of giving. Love does not require surrendering your dignity, your independence, or your right to say no. We can spend a lifetime caring for our children, sacrificing for them, forgiving their mistakes, and still reach a moment when protecting them from consequences begins to destroy something inside us. Setting a boundary is not the same as abandoning someone. Sometimes the most loving thing we can say is, "I love you, but I cannot allow you to hurt me in order to save yourself." Age does not make your voice less important. Becoming a mother, grandmother, widow, or retiree does not mean your home has already become someone else's inheritance. Your savings are not family property simply because your children may receive them someday. Your signature belongs to you. Your decisions belong to you. And as long as you are capable of choosing your own future, nobody has the right to quietly choose it for you. Grace also learned that forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. You can forgive someone without handing them back the key to the door they once used to betray you. Trust may return slowly through accountability, honesty, and changed behavior. And sometimes healing doesn't mean returning to the relationship you had before. It means building a healthier one from what remains. Perhaps the most powerful lesson is this. It is never too late to reclaim your place in your own story. Whether you are 40, 60, 80, or beyond, you are not finished simply because someone else has begun planning your future for you. There can still be mornings to enjoy, decisions to make, boundaries to establish, relationships to repair, and chapters worth living. If you were Grace, could you forgive Michael after what he did, or would that betrayal permanently change your relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would genuinely love to hear how you see it, especially if you've ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and protecting yourself. And if this story touched you or made you think about your own life differently, please subscribe to the channel and join us for more stories about family betrayal, courage, second